these things will become weaker and weaker within you. You know? Like for example, if I hold on to a rose, then I let go of the rose, there's the smell of rose in my palms, right? But if I don't keep on holding the rose and keep on catching the rose again, then the smell is going to go gradually vanish. In the same way, our klesha, the emotional defilement, if I renounce everything related to it, you know, then it's going to get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's the principle behind what is called the Sravajnana system of Buddhism. You know. But that's only one system of Buddhism. And the Sravajnana system, in ancient India, there were many, many schools of Sravajnana. Today, only Theravada is living, alive. And that's the Sravajnana system. Then the second is the way of antidote. Means you apply the antidote. You have a lot of anger, then you meditate on loving kindness. Anger and loving kindness are kind of antidotes. Right? You meditate over and over again, until your anger begins to subside. You have greed, giving, generosity. Because greed means I want this, and generosity is exactly the opposite. You know? So by giving, the word, Sanskrit word is dana, is generosity, giving. There are many kinds of giving. You know? Loving kindness is a kind of giving to people who need love and kindness. You know, is a kind of giving, and money for the poor is giving, and so on. You know? And then there is this concept of I. You know, the antidote for that is emptiness. Now, emptiness is a huge subject by itself in Buddhism, and it takes many classes to understand it. So we can't go into it, but the emptiness here basically means that there is no such I here. Seeing through that, you know, not just thinking or conceptualizing or intellectualizing, but seeing through the fact that there is no such an I here. You know? And then there's the way of transformation. And transformation is what is called the Vidyadhara. The Vidyadhara method, where anger, hatred, fear are not, you don't apply the antidote to kill them, you don't apply renunciation to get away from them, but you transform them. You know? And then this is more like an alchemical process. And the five basic emotional defilement, anger, greed, pride, and so on, jealousy, and stupidity. You know, stupidity is not the exact English word, but like mental dullness, you know, like dull kind of thing. When you fall asleep, the mind goes like this, then everything becomes dull, right? So these are the five major emotional defilements, are converted into what is called the five Buddhas, you know, transformed into the five Buddhas. And a good example of a metaphor or analogy is like, suppose you were doing a retreat in some forest, right? And there's a man-eating tiger at large. Then how do you deal with it? One way to deal with it is you just leave that forest and go to another forest, some other place, you know, and build a hut, a hermitage, and practice there. That's the way of renunciation. Another way of dealing with it is you take a bow and arrow in ancient time. Now you take guns, you know, and wait for the tiger and shoot it. You know, that's the way of antidote. You know. And the third way, the way of transformation, is you transform the tiger into a cat and put him on a lap and meditate right there. You know, that's Vidyadhara. So all these three yanas have their own style of samatha and vipassana. Samatha and vipassana. Samatha and vipassana. Each one of them is very elaborate. I mean, it will take full lectures. Just the samatha and vipassana of Sravajnana, the samatha and vipassana of Paramitayana, and the samatha vipassana of Vidyadhara. You know. So that's the samatha vipassana, a very short, concise thing. So maybe if you like to ask questions, we can ask questions. Yes.
where do you think the best environment is to meditate?
Where?
Where, so if for example, if you don't have access to like a cave or forest or like your typical example.
Well, if you are a newcomer, then definitely you require a place that is quiet and not too much sound and not too much disturbance. You know. So in ancient times they would go into the forest, right? And in the time of the Buddha, that you find many statements of Buddha saying, "Go to the forest, go to the forest." You know. And nowadays there are very little forests anyway. But if you are a little bit more advanced, then it's not necessary to go to the forest, you know, for meeting a quiet place. But definitely in the beginning, a quiet, peaceful place, hard things, anywhere, you know, it would be where you don't get disturbed too often, would be the best. Is that what you are?
Yeah, that's it.
Because in the beginning, your mind is not trained, right? So any sound, anything else, the mind just goes off there. You know? But once you're advanced enough, then it doesn't matter. Finally, the best meditation is done in the city. You know? Because once you're well trained, it doesn't matter whether you're in the city or outside the city. It's the same thing to you. Because every moment is wonderful and blissful. And you can use that as your meditation. And there's a story of a Zen master who meditated way up in the mountains in China for 20 years. And every morning he'd go to the well and draw water and carry fuel and then come back to his hut and cook his meal or whatever. After 20 years, he wrote a poem, a Zen poem, saying, "How wondrous this is, how marvelous. I draw water, I carry fuel." See? That itself is meditation for him now. He doesn't need to go to a quiet place to sit for meditation. But that's a very advanced stage, right? And for the beginner, definitely a quiet place where there's no disturbance or minimal disturbance is important. Yes.
So you're saying that like language kind of builds these conceptions which like stops us from seeing how the world really is,
yes.
Right? So if animals don't have such a language, does that mean that they can see straight away? Like, do they just get it? They just can't tell us about it, or something. I don't know.
See, like, I just talked half of the part. I don't mean to vouch for letting go all language and becoming like animal again.
Yeah, no.
Animal again. Whatever. It's like, you see, you build a motorbike. Humans built language. We made language, right? We build a motorbike. But what happens is, through the centuries, instead of you riding the motorbike is riding you. That's the problem. So there's a story of a Zen master who was asked by one of his disciples, "Do you Zen masters think?" And he said, "Of course we think." And then what's the difference between you and me? And he said, 24 hours you are run by your thought. 24 hours I run my thinking. So that's the difference. You run by your thoughts, your conceptual words and language and so on. When you're free from it, it doesn't mean you become languageless. You use language instead of being used by language. Do you get it?
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Yes.
Back with language, because sometimes you can get drawn into concepts and you can think, when you talk about greed and generosity.
Yeah, can you? I'm not used to British accent, so please. So maybe slower.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You were talking about greed and generosity, and before that I was wondering whether sometimes you can take so that you can give, whether it's knowledge, resources.
Yes.
So the more that you take, but then maybe you're taking to give, but then wanting to give for different reasons, which could then in turn be.
If you're taking to give, then the motivation is different. If you're taking just for yourself, then the motivation is different.
But
so it's ultimately the motivation.
But then, because it's weird, because say you think of that, and then you think, what if I gain pride from doing something? you don't necessarily, but you worry because you know that you can be drawn into different concepts. So then with language, you can create this sort of situation in your head where you don't know where you actually lie, and you don't know which part is like your mind, and you can only feel your emotional reaction to it.
Yeah, but you do. Well, we have to do the best we can, right? I mean, you start from wherever you are, and in the process, sometimes, like you say, you're not quite sure whether you're doing it for the selflessly or doing it for yourself. Is that what you mean?
Kind of.
Kind
Yeah,
of,
that's what I'm saying, but I
Yeah.
don't know how to know if how someone would know, because they say
I-
that you
well,
can't
I
do-
think here in this kind of situation, the most important thing is your motivation. I mean, you know what your motivation is. Whether your motivation is linked with other greed or so on is a different thing. But you still, if you have a pure motivation, that's the starting point. You know? And that itself will clear. That's the lodestone that will clear the way, right? And convert all these things into genuine motivation. So it's the motivation that, as humans, we start from conditioned state anyway, right? We are conditioned, and that's where we start from. You know? So even when we try to have a pure motivation, there will be conditioned ideas linked with that motivation. That's inevitable. You know? But because we have that pure motivation, that is gradually going to, like, you know, the lodestone, when touches copper, becomes gold. The copper becomes gold. In the same way, all these conditioned ideas become gold in the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
There's an online question from Nitima. So she's asking, what is the antidote for desire? Because it seems everything is driven by desire. Thank you.
The antidote for desire
Yeah.
is to give. Desire and attachment and greed are interrelated. You know? So the antidote for desire is to give. You know? Give generosity. Attachment, desire, greed are interrelated. They are just like different nuances of the same thing. You know? Yes.
I'm sorry, because you're talking about the antidote to greed and desire and so on, and then you said you can, instead of using the antidote, you can transform them, and that to me seems a bit vague. I don't understand how.
I didn't quite get you.
Conscious.
I didn't
Sorry.
hear you. I'm a bit old too, you know, so.
Sorry, you said that you can apply the antidote to greed, which is giving,
Yeah,
and that would, well, that's the antidote.
yeah.
But what is the difference between applying an antidote and transforming it?
Oh, transforming it.
Yes.
For transforming, it's a the system is a bit different. You know, for that you need to awaken what is called the awakening mind. You know, and in Sanskrit it's called bodhicitta. You know, bodhi means awakened, and chitta means mind, and it's basically the motivation that from now onwards, whatever I do, I will try my best. I mean, I'm conditioned, so I will slip. That's a different thing. But I will try my best to do everything that I do for the benefit of other people. You know, that motivation. When you take up that motivation, then you keep on trying and trying and trying. Then all these things begin to change. They begin to transform. You know. So, for example, have you read of Milarepa and Marpa? Any of you? None of you? Okay. Now, Marpa was a great Tibetan teacher, and his disciple Milarepa had killed 27 people. You know, and finally he came to Marpa and, please save me. You know, I made a mistake in my anger and hatred and so on, and now I would like to be liberated. So Marpa treated him really badly. He said, okay, I'll teach you, but he kept on telling, first you build a house for me, you know, and after that I'll start teaching you. So, and he said, you can't use anybody else's help, you have to do it alone. So in Tibet, they collected stones, piled up stones and made a house, and after his second story or third story, Marpa came back there, and who told you to build it this way? Pull everything down and build it this way, you know. and so on and so on, and until his back was like carrying rocks from the back was completely red, and skins come off and so on, and this went on and on and on, and when he was giving special teachings to some of his disciples, the Marpa's wife told him, he's giving special teaching, now you go there. And then he said, I don't have any money to offer him, and he said, okay, take my ring and offer it. So he went, and then the moment Marpa saw him, he took a stick out and, who the hell do you think you are? Who asked you to come here? And and you don't even have anything to offer me. No, I have this. And then he looked at it. But this is my wife's ring. I gave it to him. I gave it to her. How dare you offer my own ring back to me? And he rushed after him, and the Milarepa jumped off the window. And so on, many times like this. But what was Marpa doing? When looked at, even his wife got angry with Marpa. How? I mean, you call yourself a great guru, and you treat a poor man like this, and all these rich disciples that come, you treat them differently. And Marpa just kept quiet and said, you don't know anything, just keep quiet, keep quiet, keep quiet. And finally, what he was doing was cutting off the karma of him having killed 24 people, cutting his, and once that was gone, Milarepa became one of the greatest yogis of Tibet. So this is way of transformation, right? They transform. Marpa's motivation was to purify Milarepa, not to really, sadistically create problem for him. So the motivation changes everything. She asked the same question more or less in another way. The main part is motivation, and in Mahayana tradition, we take vow of that motivation. There's a special vow you take where from that moment onwards, everything I do will be, every practice, every meditation, everything I do will be for the sake of all sentient beings, so that I can save them, so that I can become a Buddha, so I can save them, I can help them. So that motivation is the lodestone that turns copper into gold.
You talked about with the antidote method, and you were talking about, for one thing I was interested in was the antidote to anger being love and kindness, and you're saying that when you meditate on each of these things, and you meditate, say, on the idea of love and kindness. But I'm curious, what goes through your mind when you're meditating on, like, an emotional concept or something like that? What goes through your mind to, say, break that down or something? So say if you were to break down love and kindness.
No, you don't really meditate on the emotional content per se, but you see, after having learned about how to do it, you see through that emotion is empty.
Okay.
So by stamping it empty over and over again, over and over again, the hold of that emotion becomes looser and looser and looser. So that's how you do it. That seeing of emptiness is the vipassana aspect.
Okay. Yeah. And then how it's more, it's just, so looser, more tangible. You can see it and everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a slightly silly question, but you're talking about desire and getting rid of desire, but the desire.
Talk about what?
Desire and.
Desire. Yeah.
And getting rid of that.
Yeah.
By giving.
Yeah.
But then if you give because you have the desire to get rid of desire, is
Yes,
that not
yes.
almost paradoxical?
Yeah.
Because you're constantly
Yeah, yeah.
giving a desire.
Yeah.
But then is it an okay desire to have that desire?
Yeah, it's like, you see, not all desire binds you. The desire to have things for yourself binds you, but the desire to give and loosens you. It doesn't bind you. So it's not just, desire is just a vague word, right? So it's not just desire itself that is the problem. It is your attachment to that desire that is the problem. And if it is for the self, that is attachment. If it is for him, it is not attachment. There is no attachment to it. Now, we are so conditioned that even when I give him, I may have an ulterior motive that he might give me back. That's kind of something we cannot avoid in the beginning. But if I keep on giving him, it'll ultimately I will ultimately arrive at a space where I'm just giving, and without any ulterior motive that he might give me back. Right? So it's like cutting through by repetition.
So it becomes
Yeah.
well natural.
Yeah. Yes.
So, kind of like similar to my last question, but like you said that like language kind of like constrains you, right?
Yeah.
So, to what extent do you believe that do different languages constrain you in different ways?
Yes.
Because I know obviously like you were saying in like Nepali, your word cannot be translated directly to English. So
Yes.
surely like the constraint that you would have in if you were Indian or Chinese
Yeah,
or whatever
yes,
would be
yes.
different.
Well,
Right.
there has been some research in the brain, movement, electromagnetic movements in the
Mhm.
brain, in different parts of the brain, and they have found that when you speak English or you speak Chinese or you speak French, different parts of the brain gets fired.
Mhm.
It's not exact, just because we're speaking, it doesn't mean the exact same spot in the brain is fired. Like we speak English, different part is fired more than the other. If you're speaking French, another part is. If you're speaking Vietnamese, another part is fired. So definitely something different is going on.
Yeah, because I always thought about it, like, for example, like, I had a German friend, and, in German they have prefixes before every single word.
Yeah.
So to them, like, an object will be masculine or be feminine or whatever,
Yeah.
And I remember asking one of my friends once, they were like, I was like, oh, is sand, like, masculine or feminine? She was like, oh, it's sand, it's masculine. I was like, oh, really? She's like, yeah, well, obviously, you feel it, and it's masculine. And to me, like, I was like, it's just sand, right? Because in English it's just sand. So like your perception of the world is so different depending on like,
yes.
it's like,
Yeah, I mean, that's like the example you gave of English and German.
yeah.
We have the same thing with Hindi and Nepali.
Yeah.
They have the same thing, feminine, certain objects are feminine, certain objects are masculine, Nepali doesn't have it. Nepali is like English in that sense,
Okay.
So the female things are female and male things are male. That's it, So we find it very difficult to speak Hindi. We understand Hindi because we're border, we understand a lot of Hindi, but when we speak, there's always this mistake of male and female,
Yeah.
feminine and masculine, always a mistake there. Yeah, that's true. So, and that, as I said, neuroscience has discovered that different parts of the brain fire differently when you speak different languages. So, obviously, that means that there is some experiential difference happening.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, like for example, I'll give you an example. Like I like tea, the English word. I like tea. Now, if you in Nepali you say malai, that means to me, malai, to me, chia is tea, and man parcha. Man means mind, parcha means is attached, So to me, my mind is attached to the tea. That's what it is in English, That's what I mean. I like tea, So the mind figures in more. In English, mind doesn't seem to figure in it.
Thank you.
There's a question on the internet again. They ask, how do we increase our commitment and devotion to the Guru?
Oh, but that's a totally different subject. It's something, devotion to the Guru is very Vajrayana, and it's not found in the Sravakyana system, not found in the Paramitayana system. In Vajrayana, the part of the process of practice is to see that everything is primordially pure, originally pure. We don't see it because of our conditioned ideas, the conditioned way that we see things. But if we take the blinders off, then everything is, like the Zen master said, how marvelous this is, how wondrous. that I draw water, I carry fuel, you know. Everything is primordially pure, you know. And so, in Vajrayana, you use the Guru as the path. You know. Right now, I can't see everything as primordially pure, but I can at least try to attempt my Guru as primordially pure. You know. If I can see him as primordially pure, I can see him as primordially pure, and him as primordially pure, and the whole world as primordially pure. So the Guru is the path. It is in that context that you try to see the Guru as primordially pure. You know. And the Guru, the person, is not primordially pure. I mean, he's like a human like everybody else. You know? But it's your transformation of seeing him as primordially pure that is the path. You know? So that's how the Vajrayana works. It's like, as I said in the beginning when we talked, that it's more an alchemical process, you know? Mental alchemical process.
That's great, thank you.
Yes.
Can you describe how your perception of the world changed when you looked for the self and couldn't find it?
When you what?
When you looked for the self, the I, and
Yeah.
it wasn't there, did your perception of the world change?
Yeah, the perception of the world changes in the sense that, as long as there is an I here, I mean, now, don't be mistaken, I'm not saying there's no I here, right? Okay, but like the belief that there's a solid I here and it really exists and I'm there, you know, then I look at the world as a consumer, that I can consume the world, you know, for this I. When I begin to realize from inside that that is an illusory concept, you know, it's like an illusion, you know, and it doesn't really exist that way, you know, then I don't look at the world as items to be consumed by me anymore. You know? I look at the world as an equal. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I suppose from like a moral sense of view,
Yeah.
If there's not a gap between you and the world,
World, yes.
you
Yes.
become less self-motivated and,
Yes,
and,
yes,
and
yes.
more equally compassionate.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
They're all interrelated, you know, compassion, the sense of a strong I or a no I here,
Mm.
they're all interrelated. And non-duality. You might have heard the word, they're all interrelated.